Montana Territory, 1878. The harsh wind swept across the plains like nature's cold reminder that the frontier offered no comfort to those who couldn't earn it. This was a land where dreams often withered before they bloomed, something Hannah Nelson knew better than most. At 21 years of age, Hannah had already weathered more hardship than many twice her age. Her flaxen blonde hair, usually tucked neatly beneath a practical bonnet, caught the late afternoon sunlight as she stood on the porch of the mercantile she'd inherited 6 months prior when influenza claimed her father. The building stood as the last remnant of her family in the growing settlement of Whitetail Creek. "Miss Nelson, your order from back east arrived on today's stage," called Mr. Jenkins, the freight manager, as he carried a wooden crate toward her store. "Thank you," Hannah replied, her voice carrying the practiced politeness that masked her perpetual wariness. She'd learned young that showing weakness in frontier towns invited the worst kind of attention. Hannah believed in practicality above all else. Love was a luxury that belonged in novels, not in territories where winter killed as efficiently as any outlaw's bullet. She'd watched her mother die of a broken heart after her older brother was killed by rustlers. She'd nursed her father through his final fever-racked days. The West had taught her that attachment only sharpened the inevitable pain of loss. "I'll survive by my wits and my work," she often reminded herself. That's the only reliable path for a woman alone. The mercantile provided enough income to keep her fed and sheltered, but Hannah's dreams extended beyond mere survival. She secretly hoped to expand, perhaps open a proper women's dress shop someday. But dreams required capital, and capital required risk, something she measured carefully after watching her father's failed gambles on mining ventures. What Hannah didn't know as she checked her inventory that afternoon was how quickly the careful walls she'd built around her heart would be tested. The arrival of the Morgan Brothers cattle drive from Texas changed everything. Whitetail Creek buzzed with activity as cowboys descended on the small town, bringing noise, business, and trouble in equal measure. Ethan Blackett wasn't like the other drovers. At 25, he'd already earned a reputation as one of the most skilled horsemen in 3 territories. His light brown hair fell in waves beneath his wide-brimmed hat, and when he smiled, which was often, his green eyes crinkled at the corners with genuine warmth. Unlike many who worked the drives, he avoided the whiskey and games of chance that claimed so many cowboys' wages. "Just passing through," he told Hannah when he first entered her store 3 days after arriving. "Need supplies before heading north to my brother's ranch." "Everything's priced as marked," Hannah replied, her tone businesslike despite noticing how his lean frame carried none of the swagger common to most cowboys. His face bore only the hint of stubble, suggesting he took more care with his appearance than the typical trail-worn drover. "Fair enough," Ethan said, gathering basic supplies, coffee, ammunition, tobacco for his occasional pipe. He might have remained just another customer if fate hadn't intervened the next morning. Hannah was opening her store when shouting erupted from the livery across the street. A pair of Morgan Brothers horses had broken free, spooked by something unseen, and were charging directly toward the mercantile's front porch where a local woman's 3-year-old daughter played with a wooden doll. What happened next occurred so quickly that witnesses later disagreed on the details. Ethan, passing by on his way to the telegraph office, vaulted over the hitching rail, scooped up the child, and somehow pivoted away from the charging animals in one fluid motion. His shoulder slammed against the mercantile support post, but he kept the girl safely cradled against his chest as the horses thundered past. Hannah rushed forward, heart pounding. Charlotte, are you hurt?" She took the wide-eyed but uninjured child from Ethan's arms. The cowboy winced as he straightened, clearly in pain from the impact. "She's fine, ma'am. Just startled is all." Later, after the child had been returned to her hysterical mother and the town's excitement had calmed, Hannah found Ethan sitting on her store's back step, attempting to examine what was clearly a dislocated shoulder. "You need a doctor," she said, her usual reserve softening at the sight of his pain. "Had worse," he grimaced, "though I wouldn't turn down help setting it." Hannah hesitated only briefly before nodding. Her father had taught her basic medical care, a necessity in frontier towns where doctors were scarce. "Come inside." As she helped him remove his jacket and shirt, revealing tan skin marked with the scars of his profession, Hannah felt an unwelcome flutter in her chest. This man had risked himself for a stranger's child without hesitation. Such goodness seemed out of place in a world she'd come to view as fundamentally harsh and unforgiving. "This will hurt," she warned, positioning herself to manipulate his shoulder. "I trust you," Ethan replied simply. Those 3 words, so casually offered, struck Hannah with unexpected force. Trust was as rare as rain in August out here. When the joint slipped back with a sickening pop, Ethan's only reaction was a sharp intake of breath. After helping him fashion a sling from clean muslin, Hannah found herself lingering, studying his face. "You're not from around here," she observed. "Your accent, Tennessee?" He smiled. "Kentucky originally. Left when I was 16. Been working cattle drives since, saving to buy my own spread someday." "A dreamer then," Hannah replied, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice. "Dreams are what separate men from animals, Miss Nelson. Without them, we're just surviving, not living." Their eyes met, and for the first time in years, Hannah felt seen, not as the mercantile owner or the orphaned daughter, but as herself, with all her unspoken longing for something more than mere existence. "Sometimes surviving is all we can manage," she countered, retreating behind practicality. Ethan shook his head. "That's where you're wrong. The West breaks those who merely survive. It rewards those who truly live." In the days that followed, Ethan became a regular visitor to the mercantile, ostensibly to check on supplies for his northward journey. His shoulder healed quickly, and Hannah found herself looking forward to his visits, though she'd never admit as much. Their conversations ranged from the practical to the philosophical. Ethan spoke of places Hannah had only read about: New Orleans with its music-filled streets, San Francisco's foggy harbors, the towering forests of Oregon Territory. "You could see these places yourself," he suggested one evening as he helped her close the shop, a courtesy he'd begun providing since news arrived of outlaws harassing neighboring settlements. "My place is here," Hannah replied automatically. "Is it? Or is it just where circumstance has trapped you?" The question lingered in her mind long after he'd tipped his hat and departed for the evening. 2 weeks after his arrival in Whitetail Creek, disaster struck. Hannah woke to the acrid smell of smoke and the distant sound of shouting. The livery stable was ablaze, flames licking hungrily at the dry timber of neighboring buildings. As the townspeople formed a bucket brigade, the fire jumped to the saddle shop next door to Hannah's mercantile. She worked frantically alongside neighbors to salvage what inventory she could, carrying armloads of goods to safety as the heat intensified. Through the chaos, Ethan appeared at her side, his face streaked with soot. "We need to get your ledgers and cash box," he shouted over the roar of the flames. "The roof's starting to go," she cried, pointing to where smoke billowed from the mercantile's eaves. "I'll be quick." Before she could protest, Ethan darted into the building. Minutes stretched like hours until he emerged, coughing violently but clutching her financial records and the small metal box containing her savings. No sooner had he cleared the doorway than a burning beam crashed where he'd stood moments before. By dawn, half the town's main street lay in smoldering ruins. Hannah sat numbly on an overturned crate, staring at the blackened shell of her store and home. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd built since her father's death, gone. Ethan approached, offering a steaming cup of coffee. "I'm sorry, Hannah." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and somehow that small intimacy broke the dam of her composure. Tears she'd refused to shed before the watching town flowed freely now. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered. "Where am I supposed to go?" Ethan knelt before her, his expression earnest. "Come north with me. My brother's ranch has plenty of room. You could start fresh there." "With you? I hardly know you." Even as she protested, something shifted in Hannah's heart. The mercantile had been her anchor, but also her chain. Without it, terrifying as the prospect was, she stood unbound for the first time in her adult life. "You know enough," he countered. "You know I won't leave you to face this alone." A week later, with the settlement still rebuilding, Hannah found herself perched beside Ethan on the seat of a wagon loaded with what little she'd salvaged, plus supplies purchased with insurance money the stage line had delivered. Her decision had scandalized some of the town matrons, but with the local minister's blessing and a letter of introduction to the pastor's sister near Ethan's brother's ranch, propriety was sufficiently maintained. The journey north tested them both. Spring storms turned trails to mud, A wheel broke 50 miles from the nearest settlement, and one terrifying night, they faced down a small band of horse thieves who mistook their well-provisioned wagon for easier prey than it proved to be. Through it all, Hannah discovered strengths she hadn't known she possessed and witnessed a steadfastness in Ethan that confirmed her growing feelings. Yet, as they neared their destination, her old fears resurfaced with renewed force. "What if this is a mistake?" she asked one night as they camped within 2 days' ride of the Blackett Ranch. "What if I'm not suited for ranch life? What if your brother dislikes having a strange woman thrust upon his household?" Ethan stoked the campfire, considering her words. "Daniel's wife will welcome the company of another woman. And as for you not being suited, I've watched you adapt to every challenge this journey has thrown at us. You're stronger than you know, Hannah." She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "That's not what I mean." "Then what do you mean?" The question hung between them, demanding honesty she'd avoided for weeks. "I see how you look at me," Hannah finally said, voice barely audible above the crackling fire. "I know what you hope might grow between us." Ethan waited, allowing her the space to continue. "I've watched love destroy people, Ethan. My mother withered away after we lost my brother. My father died still calling my mother's name, though she'd been gone 3 years. Love made them vulnerable in ways I can't afford to be. And yet here you are, heading toward an unknown future rather than clinging to the ashes of what was safe and familiar," Ethan observed. "That took courage." "Necessity, not courage," she corrected. Ethan moved to sit beside her on the fallen log she'd claimed as a seat. "May I tell you what I see when I look at you, Hannah Nelson?" She nodded, heart racing. "I see a woman who believes she's defined by her losses, when in truth, she's defined by how she survived them. I see someone who thinks love is a weakness, when really, it's the only thing that makes the hardships of this country bearable." He gently took her hand. "And I see someone afraid to admit that she might want the very thing she's been denying herself. Connection, partnership, love." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to open myself to the possibility of that kind of pain again." "One day at a time," Ethan replied. "Just as we've traveled this road. 1 mile, one challenge overcome, one sunset shared." Later that night, as Hannah lay beneath her blanket staring at stars brighter than any she'd seen before, she whispered to the darkness what she couldn't yet say to his face. "I'm not meant for love." The Blackett Ranch sprawled across a verdant valley backed by mountains still capped with snow despite the late spring season. Hannah's first glimpse of it from the wagon seat stole her breath, not just for its beauty, but for its clear prosperity. This was no struggling homestead, but a thriving cattle operation with substantial buildings, fenced pastures, and the unmistakable signs of permanence. Daniel Blackett proved to be older than Ethan by nearly a decade, with the same green eyes but a more weathered face and a reserved manner that initially intimidated Hannah. His wife, Sarah, however, welcomed her with unbridled enthusiasm. "Another woman under 60 within 20 miles, she exclaimed, embracing Hannah like a long-lost sister. "You must tell me everything about the latest fashions. We get catalogs, but it's hardly the same as hearing from someone who's seen civilization recently." The promised 2-week stay stretched into a month as Hannah found herself increasingly integrated into ranch life. She helped Sarah with household management, applied her mercantile knowledge to the ranch's bookkeeping, and even learned to ride properly under Ethan's patient instruction. "You sit a horse like you were born to it," he commented one afternoon as they rode the perimeter of the north pasture, checking fences. Hannah laughed, a sound that came more easily now. "Hardly, but I'm learning." As summer bloomed across the valley, so too did the undeniable attraction between them. Yet whenever Ethan's gaze lingered too long or their hands touched in passing, Hannah retreated behind carefully constructed walls. The arrival of a letter from Whitetail Creek in early July seemed to validate her caution. The town's reconstruction committee wrote asking if she would consider returning to re-establish her mercantile, offering favorable terms on a newly built storefront. "You're considering it," Ethan said that evening, finding her on the porch swing where she'd retreated to think. "It's what I know," Hannah replied, unable to look at him. "A clear path forward. And what we've built here these past months, that's not clear." The pain in his voice cut deeper than she'd expected. "What have we built, Ethan? I help your brother's wife with housekeeping. I keep ledgers. I'm a useful guest, nothing more." You know that's not true, he said quietly. Not to me. Not to Sarah and Daniel, who already consider you family. When Hannah remained silent, Ethan continued, frustration edging his words. What are you so afraid of? That you might be happy? That you might build something that matters? Or that you might love someone who loves you back? Yes, she cried, rising to her feet. Yes to all of it. Because everything that matters can be taken away. Everyone I've ever loved has left me, one way or another. I'm not going anywhere, Hannah. You can't promise that. No one can. Ethan stepped closer. You're right. I can't promise forever. No one in this life can. But I can promise today, and tomorrow, and every day I'm given. I can promise to build something with you that's worth whatever time we have. He took her hands in his. I've never met anyone like you. So strong and stubborn and afraid to admit what she wants. But I see you, Hannah Nelson. I see past those walls you've built. For one breathless moment, Hannah allowed herself to believe it could be that simple. Then the memory of her mother's hollow eyes after her brother's death, of her father's broken spirit, reasserted itself. I need time, she whispered, pulling away. I need to think. The next morning, Hannah rose before dawn and asked Daniel to drive her to the stagecoach stop in the nearby town. She left a letter for Ethan explaining her decision to return to Whitetail Creek, thanking him for his kindness and wishing him well. What she couldn't bring herself to write was how deeply she had come to care for him, or how terrified that feeling made her. August brought sweltering heat to Whitetail Creek and the grand reopening of Nelson's Mercantile in its new location. Hannah threw herself into work, expanding her inventory to include more items for women and children, determined to build something even more successful than before. If she sometimes found herself scanning the street for a familiar figure, or if she kept the letter Ethan had sent, returned unopened, locked in her desk drawer, she refused to acknowledge it even to herself. The second week of September, as Hannah was closing up shop, Sheriff Mills appeared at her door. Evening, Miss Nelson. Got word you should know about. Seems there's been trouble up north. Raid on the Blackett Ranch. Rustlers hit them hard, drove off half their stock, and burned a barn. Hannah's heart seized. Was anyone hurt? The sheriff hesitated. Reports said the younger Blackett brother took a bullet. Survived, but it was touch and go for a while. That night, Hannah paced her small rooms above the mercantile until dawn broke. By noon, she had hired a manager for the store, packed her belongings, and purchased passage on the northbound stage. The journey that had taken weeks with a wagon passed in a blur of anxiety and regret. When she finally arrived at the Blackett Ranch, the place she'd fled 2 months earlier, Hannah barely recognized it. The blackened skeleton of the largest barn stood as a stark reminder of the violence that had occurred. The normally bustling ranch yard seemed eerily quiet. Sarah spotted her first, rushing from the house with an expression of disbelief. Hannah? My God, what are you doing here? I heard about the raid. About Ethan. Hannah managed, suddenly uncertain of her welcome. Is he alive? Thank the Lord, Sarah replied. But not well. The bullet took infection. He's been fevered for days. Hannah followed Sarah into the house and to the bedroom, where Ethan lay pale and still, his breathing shallow. Daniel sat beside him, looking up in surprise at Hannah's entrance. She came for him, Sarah explained simply. Daniel nodded, standing to offer Hannah his chair. Maybe you can reach him where we can't. He calls your name sometimes, when the fever's high. Alone with Ethan, Hannah took his hand, shocked at the heat radiating from his skin. I was a coward, she whispered. I ran because I was afraid of exactly this, of caring so much that it could destroy me to lose you. But I realized something, Ethan. I'm already destroyed. I left my heart here when I fled. Through the night, Hannah bathed Ethan's fevered brow, spoke to him of everything and nothing, and prayed as she hadn't since childhood. Near dawn, his fever broke. When Ethan's eyes fluttered open, focusing with confusion on her face, Hannah felt tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. Am I dreaming? He rasped, voice barely audible. No, she smiled through her tears. I'm really here. His fingers weakly squeezed hers. You came back. I was a fool to leave, Hannah admitted. When I heard you were hurt, nothing else mattered. Not my store, not my fears, nothing but getting back to you. As September faded into October, Ethan regained his strength. Hannah remained, helping with harvest preparations and stepping back into the rhythm of ranch life as though she'd never left. Yet between them, something had fundamentally changed. No longer did she retreat from his touch or guard her words. Instead, she found herself drawn to his side, seeking out moments alone together. One crisp autumn evening, as they walked along the creek that gave the ranch its name, Ethan stopped beneath a towering cottonwood whose leaves had turned brilliant gold. "I need to ask you something, Hannah, and I need you to be honest." She nodded, heart quickening. "Did you come back because you felt guilty? Because you thought I might die?" "No," she replied without hesitation. "I came back because I finally understood something I've been fighting for months." "And what's that?" Hannah took a deep breath. "That surviving isn't living. That safety isn't happiness. That I've been so focused on avoiding pain that I've been numb to joy." She stepped closer, placing her palm against his chest where beneath layers of cotton and wool, a scar marked where the bullet had nearly taken him from her. "I whispered something to myself the night before I left," Hannah confessed. "I told myself, I'm not meant for love." Ethan covered her hand with his own. "And what would you say now?" "That I was wrong. That perhaps I was always meant for love, just not any love. Your love. That maybe instead of fearing destiny, I should embrace it." "Hannah Nelson," Ethan said solemnly, though his eyes shone with unmistakable happiness. "Are you saying you love me?" "I am," she nodded, tears threatening again. "Though I'm still afraid of what that means." "It means we face whatever comes together," he replied, drawing her closer. "The good and the bad, the joys and the sorrows." As golden leaves drifted down around them, Ethan bent to kiss her, a promise made in the fading light of day. They married on Christmas Day, 1878, in the Blackett ranch house decorated with pine boughs and candles. Hannah wore a dress of deep blue velvet that Sarah had helped her sew, with her golden hair arranged in an elaborate knot adorned with small white flowers from the hothouse Daniel had built for his wife years before. Spring brought new life to the ranch. Calves in the pastures, green shoots in the kitchen garden Hannah had expanded, and most miraculous of all, the first fluttering movements of the child she carried beneath her heart. "A son, I think," Ethan mused one evening as they sat on the porch of the small but comfortable house they'd built on the eastern portion of the ranch lands, close enough to the main house for family meals, far enough for privacy. "Or a daughter," Hannah countered, smiling. "Either way, a blessing." "Are you happy?" Ethan asked, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Hannah considered the question, thinking of the mercantile she'd sold to her manager, the fear she'd conquered, the love she'd embraced despite its risks. "Happier than I ever believed possible," she answered truthfully. "You changed my destiny, Ethan Blackett." He laughed softly. "No, my love. I just helped you find the courage to change it yourself." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, talking of their hopes for the child to come, plans for expanding their portion of the ranch, dreams that stretched into a future neither could have imagined alone. The western sky, vast and star-filled above them, no longer seemed a wilderness to be endured but a home they had claimed together, a destiny chosen rather than feared.